Noel, pardon me. I'm going to mute everybody and unmute Noel.
Okay, thank you. There, it's me in front of a truck. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're well and safe. That's important in our business and usual times, particularly so now. I'm going to give an outline of the economic environment we're living in right now. And I'm going to start by quoting Donald Rumsfeld, the used to be Secretary of Defense for the Bush administration, and he gave this big long lecture one time about knowing what you know, not knowing what you don't know, and also knowing what you don't know. And what I'm going to tell you a few things as we go through this, what we know, and I'm also going to tell you some things that we don't know. This is a time of great uncertainty, a lot of unprecedented things for which there's no history to go by. And so one of the things that all of us need to do is to be increasingly vigilant, to be out looking at the environment, and also to be considering more than one outcome for any one of these big questions we have. If you do that, when the truth becomes available, it's likely that you'll see it before your competition does. And if you've thought through some of these scenarios that I'll talk about, there's also likely that you'll execute much quicker than your competition. This is not a time to be sitting back and letting things happen. So let's start. I want to, the most important economic variable right now is not economic, it's political. Political involving restrictions on economic activity having to do with the virus. And I've got two slides addressing this, and the purpose of these is to get some sense as to how bad this thing is and how quickly we can expect to have relief from the restrictions. This first slide is a recitation of daily new cases and new deaths from Western Europe. And I bring it up because Western Europe is ahead of us in the curve. They started earlier, and now you can see clearly that they're headed in the right direction, down. You can see that arrow going down there. The other thing is look at the number of deaths per day at 4,000 for an entire continent. This has not turned out to be, at least so far, nearly as bad as what people feared might happen. We are not anywhere near in the U.S., as an example, or worldwide, anywhere near to what happened in 1918, the great Spanish flu, which a lot of people are using as a precedent for this. And yes, there are similarities in the quickness of the contagion and the amount by which it spreads. However, its mortality and even the number of cases is much lower than the case of the Spanish flu. And what that says to our governors is that perhaps they need to rethink the trade-off between the possibility of saving lives and the certainty of the damage that we're doing to our economy. Let's go to the next slide. This is a picture of this. It's the same picture for the United States. And you can see that recently, and I put this in days of the week, because you can see the day of the week pattern. So we've been falling since last Tuesday in deaths, you can see, and we've been falling since Thursday in cases. But we do so every week. So the question is, are we making any progress this week over the next? And to help with that, I have put it in a 7-day moving average over there on the right, and you can see that we are making progress. That both lines are headed down. The important thing, though, is that they're headed down slowly. And what that says is that there's not going to be an easy political decision to get the economy started again, because we're not anywhere near through this contagion. We're headed in the right direction, but we're not almost through like Europe is. So what that says is that any further reductions in the restrictions will have to be justified by looking differently at the trade-off between the possibility of saving lives and the certainty of an economic disaster. Let's go to the next slide. So what that says to us in trucking is that the pace of reduction in the restrictions is going to be more slow than we would like. Now, when I said economic disaster, here is one scenario. This is what they call a V-shaped recovery, recession and recovery. And you can see in the, and what I've done is to look at the various components of the economy and projected them out monthly, by the way, between now and the fall. And then I've summed it up as a quarterly thing because that's what most of our statistics show. And you can see that in some things, like investment and manufacturing and goods, there is a big drop-off. It will be a surprise. This is not very good, what I'm going to say. It will be a surprise if the second quarter is not the worst quarter in U.S. economic history. This is an average cut at it. Other people have predicted more. So this is a pretty nasty thing. And it's going to affect trucking, obviously. Fortunately, so far, the effects on the goods-producing economy based on the first quarter have been less than we thought. It's interesting that the biggest loser in the first quarter was healthcare. You would have thought the biggest gainer. But what's happened, as you're probably aware, is that most healthcare providers have stopped doing routine care, and a lot of customers are hesitant about going to the doctor. So that sector dropped more than any other. It dropped more than entertainment, and it dropped more than restaurants. The goods-producing part of the economy in the first quarter, and this has not been updated because that information came out this week or late last week, but the goods-producing economy contributed 0.27 percentage points to the 4.8 drop in GDP we had in the first quarter. That's significant in normal times, but when you compare to the other things that caused that whopping drop, it was very small. So we're hoping that although the people in Las Vegas may suffer direly from this cut, and Disney might suffer direly, that trucking will not suffer as much as we fear. Let's go on to the next slide. What's interesting about this recession is it's V-shaped as opposed to U-shaped, and that orange line, which was the shape of the 2008 recession. And what's important here is the amount of time it takes to get from the top to the bottom. And notice that I've purposely made this recession the same depth as the other one. The problem is that it dropped to that depth in 2 quarters rather than 8, and it recovers 95% of the way in 2 quarters rather than 13 to 14. So what that says is this is going to put great pressure on the ability of the industry to adapt to such violent maneuvers. Let's go to the next slide. I also forecast capacity utilization. And I've got a model that tracks the way that truckers have behaved for a long time. And basically what it says is the reason why we get changes in capacity utilization is that the industry adapts to changes in demand. And it does so with a lag, with some imperfections. And it gets behind, and then it catches up, and then it goes ahead. And when it gets way behind, we get the kind of spikes that we got. You can see here, and remember the one in 2004? There it is. And then there was one in 2014 when we had that bad winter. And then there was the one 2 years ago in 2018. Now, what the right hand, I'll come back to that capacity utilization in a minute. The right hand picture shows the change in demand, that's the big fat bars, compared to the change in supply, which are the light bars. And it's kind of, I really worked hard to make these different, and I can't. But here's the story, and it really doesn't matter between the two. What happens is the industry gets a change in demand, and it tries to change its supply, and then it gets behind or gets ahead, just like I said. Here's the important thing. Look over there at the right where we are today. This is what a V-shaped radical recession, and we've already had the downward cut. That's a done deal. That's 5 times greater than the biggest quarterly adjustment we had to make in '08. So the pressure on the industry to adapt, to change its capacity, is, if we indeed have this terrible downturn that everyone thinks will occur, will be far greater than we've ever had in the past. Now, remember from that past slide that we also come up rather rapidly, and you can see it here in those things above zero, almost immediately after we went the other direction. And what if history is a guide, and this is one of these big F's, this is one of those things that we know we don't know. But if history is a guide, the industry will lag in its making of these adjustments. And so it'll start cutting guys and women from the trucks 2 to a month to 3 months later than they should have. They're trying to keep people employed, and they'll keep doing it until they start feeling a little safer. By that time, the economy may well have come back and demand may well have gone up. At the same time, they were still cutting. And they won't start adding guys until they're really confident, which may be too late to keep the industry from going into a capacity crisis. And so what the chart on the left shows, and it's history until we get to this point right now, if that history repeats itself, we'll have the worst capacity crisis we've ever had sometime late this year or early next. How shall I put this? It's all the more remarkable because if you look at the transportation demand underlying this, and I don't have the slide here, we don't get back to the same level of transportation we had in the first quarter of, or the fourth quarter of 2019 until 2022 or 2023. So the market will be somewhere maybe 5% below what we're used to, but at very tight levels. Now, let me back off here a minute and say what I'm trying to do is to get your attention about the kind of radical things that could happen. We have never been subject to this kind of economic pressure before in our lives. And you could argue that we've never seen this kind of short-term economic pressure in the history of either the U.S. economy or the Canadian economy. And we just don't know what happens. And I guarantee you, we will be surprised. And this is one of the big counterintuitive surprises. The first time I did this, I said, this has got to be wrong. And one of my customers who buys this from me says, this has got to be wrong. And then we thought through it and says, wait a minute, it's possible. So I think that's my last slide. Is there one more?
One more, yeah.
Okay, yes. Oh, there's 2 more. So let's look at what's happening right now. And one of the big changes this time, which is a very good thing for all of us, is due to the graces of truckstop.com and DAT, we have weekly information as to what's going on in the spot market. This happens to be their market demand index, which is the ratio of demand to supply, or loads posted to trucks posted. When it's high, market's tight. When it's low, market's loose. And you can see that it was running, and this is percent or below the recovery average. So it was running above the recovery average in the fall, and it got actually quite tight for a little bit there when we had that hoarding effect. And also flatbeds had a very warm winter to benefit from. And then suddenly it dropped, and it got down to within, it got to within a few percentage points of the worst point in '08. Now it seems to have turned back up again, still low, but up. And that makes sense because, as you almost all are aware, in the States anyway, some of the restrictions have been lifted. So we would expect some recovery. So this is evidence of a very tight market that may be relieving a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. I think it's the last one. This is rates again from truckstop.com, and you can see they were running at about the same level for quite a while. Low, by the way, by historical standards, certainly low by 17, 18 standards. And then they went up a little bit in both van and reefer with the hoarding effect, and then dove. And that is because of the reductions in demand that this event suggests we will get. So I believe I've lost my picture here a minute. Let's see if I can get it back. Yes, I think that's the last. Yes, that's the last one. So let me sum this up by the contagion is going to put big pressure on the politicians to make practical decisions about the reduction in restrictions. We are to the point now where the economy can't stand any more of it. And so even though we still have a fair amount of deaths, we're going to have to accept that there's risk in our economy. It would be easier if it was falling like it did in Australia, for instance, but it's not for us. These restrictions have a huge effect on the economy. We're hoping they have less effect on trucking, but I wouldn't bet on it. And finally, the speed with which things are happening is completely unprecedented in our experience. And that means that all of us are likely to be surprised, dramatically surprised sometime between now and my birthday in December. So thanks.
Okay, well, great. I appreciate that, Noel. So if anyone has any questions for Noel, feel free to ask them right now.
Noel, this is Adam with Expeditus. On this last slide here, hi. The last slide that's actually still showing up, it's so have prices dropped, and then I see it says 2018 week. Are we looking actually at, is it 2019 going into 2020?
Yes, no, I'm sorry. That's a old, yeah, I haven't changed that. I'm sorry. This is, that's week 17 of 2020.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for catching that. Sorry. Notice that reefer went up because reefer is the sector least affected by the rules because we're eating as much as we used to. We're just not buying half of it from a restaurant. We're making it ourselves for a change.
Any other questions for Noel?
This is Mo with Easter Logistics.
Yes.
The question I have is with this curve, with the V curve, and I may have missed it, my phone's going in and out. Do you see that potential curve getting back to, you said 2019 levels, is that 21, end of 21, 22, or are they going to be reduced 5% until that point?
Okay, my view is that it won't get back until 2022 or so. The president's view and the optimist view is that it'll get back very quickly because of the stimulus. And then, of course, there's the real pessimists that say what we're doing is kicking off a very significant recession that'll keep us well below into the end of 2021. I think we're going to have a quick, euphoric recovery that'll end up being disappointed, which means we'll get up to maybe within 10% or 5% of where we would like to be, and we won't get and the subsequent move back to normal will be much slower than we hope. Did that answer your question?
Yes. And then one last thing, and then I'll let you go so you can get on. The drivers, you said most companies are waiting too long to let drivers go versus holding on to them, hoping that business does come back. Are you saying it's the right thing to keep the drivers on and keep them going? Or are you saying it's the best idea is to let them go and then bring them back in 3 months?
If there ever was a time to invest in driver capacity in a recession, this is the one. You know, I mean, it's what a gambler would do. Truckers almost never do that. But if there ever was a time when you have if you think there's going to be a V-shaped recovery, this is the one to do so.
And then also with dispatchers, you would concur that as well?
Sure. Yeah, particularly them, because the dispatchers are the ones that are going to get your loads and get and find the drivers again. So and it depends on the kind of risk that you want to take. And if there ever was a time to make a gamble, this is the one, if you're a gambler.
Well, I'm seeing eye to eye with you, and I just wanted to make sure I was hearing that accurately. I appreciate your time.
Okay, Kevin Rod, you on?
Yeah. Very good. I just want to give an update from my last presentation on the PPP program, and more specifically this time around on other SBA programs that are available. As far as to start with the PPP program, first and foremost, there is money available. I think everyone heard that the second round was going to go quickly and that monies would be gone extremely quickly. Funds opened up a week ago last Friday, and there are still plenty of funds available. Round one went in large chunks of funds. Round two is going in very small chunks of funds. I think the small business person is really getting the money this time around in the smaller increments rather than the very, very large increments we saw in round two. Like the COVID curve that Noel talked about, the PPP curve is slowing down as well. The number of loans and the amount of loans, like I mentioned, are really slowing down and really getting smaller and slower. So if there's anyone out there that still needs a PPP loan, there is money available, and they should take advantage of that. One thing that I would like to share with this group, we as bankers have heard across the board, the thing slowing down the system the most right now is multiple companies going to multiple banks to try to get PPP loans. If you're applying at 4 or 5 different banks, you are just slowing down the system to try to get SBA certificate numbers for an allocation of those SBA PPP funds. So if you have a good relationship with your banker, go to that banker, go to one bank, and try to get through the system that way than trying to go to multiple banks. There is activity in the EIDL program, the EIDL program. I have heard more clients receiving grant money from that program. Now, again, that is netted against the PPP program, but the system was down and then up again for the last week and a half. The system is up, and there are companies that are getting funds through the EIDL grant program. You go directly to the SBA site to apply for that. There's a tab on there to apply, and it directly links to you. There is also a program for economic bridge loan, an SBA Express bridge loan. I have not done any of those loans, nor have I heard anyone in this region do loans. Everyone is just kind of overwhelmed with PPP loans, and they have not done a bridge loan. But there is bridge financing through the SBA available. The downside of this bridge financing for COVID is that the max rate is 6.5% plus prime. So your rate is going to be 9.75% on that financing. Definitely want to go PPP with a forgiveness loan over that type of financing if you can. But there is express bridge loan financing available. I just haven't heard anyone going after that so far. The other topic that I want to discuss is the debt relief. If you currently have an SBA loan, the SBA is paying 6 months of payments on that SBA loan. So a little helpful hint here, if you have an SBA loan, take advantage of those 6 months of payments by the SBA. The other thing that the SBA is allowing is a deferment program. So if you get to the end of the 6 months, 3 months into this, and you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel for your business, not only will the SBA allow you to miss those payments and the SBA will make those payments, they will allow you to defer payments beyond that period of time. So keep that in mind. You may want to take advantage of a payment by the SBA if you currently have an SBA loan, but also a deferment period. They're allowing both for certain clients, and I've advanced that for probably a handful of clients where I've got a deferment period the SBA is paying the payment for the next 6 months. Last topic, and then I'll open it up for questions. Forgiveness. I'm getting a lot of questions now from the funding of the PPP loan. How do you get the forgiveness on the PPP loan? The SBA really has not been specific on how you apply for forgiveness of the loan. They're still so swamped.
Good work, Dean. I don't know whether they call you Dean or Steve.
So hopefully that's forthcoming. There is obviously a calculation that you can calculate 2.5 times your average payroll for 2019. That is expected to be forgiven, plus 25% of those, as I said the last time, can be used for things like mortgage payments, utilities, rent. But the formula and the application for that forgiveness has not been shared with bankers yet as to how you go about that. So that's my quick update from the last presentation. Are there any questions on these programs at this point?
Yeah, I have an office. All our offices are owned by the people who manage them, and I have one that was trying to. He was a little delayed in asking for his PPP, and he's speaking to him Friday, and he said his bank isn't taking them anymore. They stopped over a week ago. So what's the answer for him?
Well, I'm prejudiced, but I would definitely look for a small community bank right now, because they're the ones that can compete with the large banks. Small community banks are taking advantage of this time to try to capture clients from large banks, and so they're trying to process these as quickly as possible and try to earn a new customer, frankly.
He just needs to be a little patient with them and maybe go back and at least get the process going.
Yeah, and there are banks out there saying we're just not doing the program anymore, we're overwhelmed. That's where I recommend going to another bank. The only thing that I don't recommend is going to multiple banks. You don't want to put 3 different applications in with 3 different banks. Not only are you clogging up the system, that's the one area that the SBA is going to start looking for fraud.
I got you. I heard that part, so I'm with you on that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
This is Mo from Isha Logistics. Actually, I was on the phone with our banker going over the PPP loan and the forgiveness part of it. And what they're doing is each financial institution on the 10th week is going to ask for your 941s or 1099s that you reported on the quarterly if you've gotten to that point. And anything that's left at that point, they're going to put on a payment plan at the 3.75.
Well, I agree with some of the information that you're talking about, but the SBA is saying that it's a little early to start talking about forgiveness because we're not sure how long this is going to last. And then one other comment about the 375, the repayment for the PPP loan is over a 2-year period at 1%.
You're absolutely correct. I apologize. That is accurate. The 375 is for the ELID. You're absolutely correct.
Okay, any other questions for Kevin? Okay, hearing none. Thanks very much, Kevin, again, for the update this week. Everybody has Kevin's email address, so if you need to reach out to him after the fact, you can reach out to Kevin.